Good morning, class. Today we will start with a new chapter in your moral science book. Open page number 11. We have a new chapter. This chapter is about devotion, right? Our faith and our belief. How much we are devoted to God and how God can actually influence our life. Now, see here in this chapter, you can see there are these friends, they are sitting together and they are actually talking to each other. They are discussing about God, whether whether there is actually a God, whether they should believe in God, and there are different things apart from that. So let's start. It's a nice chapter, right? It's the first chapter of your book. I'm sure you all have your books with you. So let's start devotion. See, I've written few words that were said by Mother Teresa here. We need to find God, and He cannot be found in noise and restlessness. God is the friend of silence, right? Now, see, they've given some learning objectives here. God resides in each one of us. Yes, we all believe that God lives in all of us, right? To find God, we must look inwards. And in case if you have to find God, if you're willing to find God, then you have to understand one thing, that you have to look inward rather than going here and there looking for God, trying different things. The best thing that you can always do is look inward, right? Second point, it says here, devotion to God is not only about worshipping. Our devotion is manifest in good deeds. Yes, it is not necessary that if you're devoted to God, then you should always pray, you should be too religious, a pious kind of a person. But if you're doing good deeds, if you're helping someone, taking care of someone, then of course you are acting, according to God. So that is again another part of devotion. God is the ultimate power, whom we look to when we need guidance. So, whenever we need guidance, you must have seen whenever you're scared or whenever you are in need of help, what you say, you call up. You actually call the name of God. You believe that God is around somewhere. God is there to help you, to support you. And that is actually true, right? So that God is the ultimate power. He's the one who will save you. He's the one who will rescue you, right? So remember whom we should believe in. We should believe in God, and God will always save us. Next, it says, the voice of truth is the voice of God. We can trust it blindly. So, the voice of truth. If you are saying truth, then of course it is the voice of God, and we can always trust it. That too blindly. But in case if you are lying, then of course that is not the word of God. If we serve humanity, we do the greatest service to God. So if you are serving God, right? Uh, if you're serving God, then of course you will get rewards, but to a certain limit. But if you are serving humanity, if you are helping each other, if you're standing, to support, if you're there to support your friends, if you are always there, if you are working for the humanity, then of course that is a kind of a service to God. Now, I'm sure the topic is clear, devotion. Let's start with a story. It's a beautiful story, so let's go through it. Willie and his friends had spent an entire evening discussing if there really was a God. Was any God. Okay. Now here we can see that Willie is there, his friends are there, and they spent the entire evening discussing about whether there actually was a God. Right? Samir had insisted that there indeed was God. I believe that Samir is a kind of a religious person, and that is why he believes that yes, of course, there is a God. And it was because of him that the entire world functioned the way it did. Amir had fully agreed with Samir and said it was God who made every person think, behave, and act in a particular way. Now, Samir was there, and even Amir, he agreed with Samir and he said, yes, I believe that everything that works in this world, it is actually taken care by God. God is the one who guides everything. God is the one, He makes us do things in a certain way, the way He wants us to do. Right? So, the way we behave, the way we act, it is all controlled by God. Right? Willie did not disagree with him, but in his heart he was a little skeptical. Now he he did not directly refuse, but it was difficult for him to believe that yes, of course there was a God or there was any God. If God is really there and if He makes me do what I do, why have I never heard His voice? So he had a genuine kind of a thought in his mind that if God is really there and if He's making me do certain things, then how come I've never heard His voice? Willie wondered. Wondered means he thought to himself. Besides, if God is really there and He controls our minds, why is He letting me doubt His existence? Willie just shook his head and decided not to think much about it. Now, Willie, he thought a little bit more about the same thing, and then he thought, okay, if God is actually making us behave in a certain way, then how come the same God is, letting me doubt Him? How come the same God is letting me doubt that whether God really exists or not? When it became dark and it was time to go home, the friends dispersed. So it was dark time. It was the evening when they started this whole conversation, and now it was getting dark. So they decided to go home. Willie's house was the farthest. Farthest means, away. So he usually came on a motorcycle when he had to meet his friends. So he used to come by his bike, of course, the motorcycle, when he had to meet his friends. As he rode his motorbike that evening, he could not stop himself from pondering over the discussion he just had with his friends. Now, while he was going back home, he was still thinking about the same thing, that whether God exists or whether God really existed or not. So he still had the same thing going on in his mind again and again. Pondering means he was thinking over it, right? Is God really there? Does He talk to people? Does He make people do what they do? These thoughts kept coming to his mind again and again. Now he was in trouble. He kept thinking about God. When Willie was crossing a milk booth, he suddenly had an urge to stop and buy some milk. Now, while he was crossing that particular booth, he thought that I should buy some milk. He was not particularly fond of milk, but he stopped anyway. He went to the booth and bought a packet of milk. He was not sure what he was going to do with it. Neither he drank milk or tea, nor did his wife Zareen. Now, maybe it was just an impulse. He bought a packet of milk, but he had no idea what to do with it. He had no idea why he was not very fond of milk, tea, or anything as such. And the same with his wife Zareen, right? But now that he had bought it, he slipped it into his bag and started his motorcycle again. Now, finally, he had bought it, so he kept it. He, rather than throwing it away or acting in a weird manner, he kept that milk with him. After riding for a little while more, he again had a strange urge, you understand, a kind of a forceful feeling of turning around and going in a direction that would take him away from home. He had an urge, a different kind of a feeling within him that forced him to take a U turn, and then rather than going towards his home, he took just the opposite way. Okay. He looked at his watch. It was 7 p.m. The weather is good, suitable for a long ride. But Zareen will be worried if I'm late, he thought. He somehow thought that, okay, I should go for a long ride, but he was a little bit worried about his wife as well. Okay. Willie gave it a thought and decided he would go on a long ride. He pulled out his mobile phone and informed Zareen that he would be late. He was kind and decent enough. He informed his wife and told her that he would be late. Now he was riding on a road that he was not very familiar with. After riding for another 6 kilometers, he noticed that his motorcycle was low on fuel. Now, maybe he must have not checked the fuel tank and all. So, while he was on his way, he was just riding off, he saw that his motorcycle was low on fuel. So, he stopped at a petrol station to get some fuel. When he was about to start again, after taking fuel, he heard the sound of a baby crying a pathetic cry. So while he was on his way, he was about to go, he heard a baby cry. And that cry was really pathetic. The child was maybe, actually crying, and maybe the child was in pain, right? So what he did, let's see, as if without any control over his actions, Willie found himself parking his motorbike in a corner and walking in the direction from where the baby's sound came. He located the house but found it bolted from inside. He was about to knock but thought other people in the house might be sleeping. So, he stopped at the, of course, petrol pump. He stopped there. He uh, got off his bike, and then he walked towards the sound from where this child was crying. When he reached there, the room or the house, the main door of the house was locked from inside, and he thought of knocking it, but then he thought maybe the other people might be sleeping. He laughed at the strange things he had been doing all this while and turned around. But the baby cried again. Now he could not stop himself. He knocked at the door and got a rather impolite response. Now, of course, he was a kind man. He couldn't control himself. So, what he did, he finally knocked. When he knocked, he got an impolite response. Who is it? Go away. But before Willie could leave, a lady opened the door. The lady was holding the crying baby. She said, I apologize for my husband's words. Do you want something? Willie said, no, thank you. I've brought some milk. And he gave the milk packet to the lady. He saw a tear roll down her cheek as she said, thank you. My husband lost his job a few months ago. All our savings were used up, and today we did not have any milk for the baby. So you can understand whatever he was doing, his actions, they were actually guided by God. This poor child was in need of milk, and just because of his urge, Willie bought this packet of milk, and now he was about to give it to the right person. I did not know what to do, so I was praying to God to send an angel. You must be that God sent angel. So she's actually happy. She must be praying because for her child. And finally, when she got the packet of milk, she said that I was praying to God that he should send an angel for my child. Willie tried to smile, but he could not hold his tears. All he could say was, God is there, and he makes us do what we do. So finally, he actually faced an incident, or he himself experienced the power of God. And that is why he understood. Now he is no more doubting anything. He finally understood, yes, there is God. There is a supreme power. Right? And finally, maybe he was trying to smile, but he couldn't control his tears as well. I hope you have understood the story. It's a beautiful story. Just go through it, read it. I have read each and every word for you, and I have explained it. It's not that I've only read it for you. I have read it and I've explained it. So now your work is to read it again, go through it and see if there's anything difficult. Right? Let's continue. Slice of life. God is there and he talks to us in his own way. Right? So we all know that. Most of us, right? We do believe in God and we know that he's there. He talks to us. He's there to guide us, help us, right? God controls the earth and all its beings. He makes us all do what we do. God has his own ways of addressing the worries of all his children. So God has got a different way, a different manner, a set pattern how he makes us do what we do. We should always listen to our hearts. God speaks to us by making us feel certain things. So the feeling that you get, the urge that you get, all these feelings, they are somewhat controlled by God. And these feelings, they are there to guide us. They are there to tell us what is right, what is wrong, what is that which God really wants us to do. Is that clear? Now, come to page number 14. You have your question and answers here. See, question number 1 is easy. It says, what discussion did Willie and his friends have? Now, I hope you remember that they were discussing about God, whether there is a God, there is any God, right? So they spent the whole evening, what they were doing, they were discussing if there really was any God. So they had different doubts. What was Willie skeptical about? Willie was in a kind of a doubtful situation where it was very difficult for him to trust and believe in God. It was difficult for him to believe that yes, there was some supreme power or there was some God. So he had that thing going on in his mind. He was still pondering over some questions. See, what did he wonder? He really wondered. See, it says here, he wondered whether there is any God. Does he talk to people? Right? These were the questions that he was thinking about again and again. What was the first strange urge that Willie had on his way back? Why was it strange? The first urge that Willie had was of buying a milk packet. Right? That was the first thing. And why was it strange? Why? Because he never liked having tea. And he was not at all fond of milk as well. But somehow, because of an impulse, because of an, urge, he bought that packet of milk. What was the second urge that Willie had? Did he go by his urge? Yes. The second urge was that he should turn his bike, go for a ride, right? And of course, he followed his heart. What made Willie realize that God is indeed there and he makes us do what we do? Finally, Willie understood at the end of the chapter that whatever he did or whatever he was doing was again guided by God. It was God's doing. He was making him do or act in a certain way, right? And because of which somehow he was able to deliver that packet of milk to the right person, to the child who was in need. And the lady, the one who prayed to God, it again proves that there is God by she was praying to God for her little child. And of course, there was someone, maybe a stranger, who acted as an angel and was present there to help this lady. So again, everything comes back to the same thing, that yes, of course, there is God. So that was the last question. We've done it. Make sure you just go through it, read it nicely, go through the question and answers, and just do let me know if you have any doubts. Right? So that is it for today. Next chapter we'll do in the next video. Thank you.